just like being a good leader in life, you're not always liked. But when you own your leadership style, when you own the man that you are and you're authentic with him and you feel good about everywhere you bring him in the world, you might not be liked, but I can guarantee you, you're probably respected.
I knew you.
That is what,
like, yes,
and
yes.
that is what is most important, because even high quality good leaders, they're not always liked. Majority of them, if they are liked by everybody, they probably are doing something wrong and they're not high quality
Or
leaders.
they're just not fucking doing anything valuable.
Right.
They're not saying shit of value.
And you're not, but then you're not a high quality leader,
exactly,
right? You know?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing as men. As men, if we are liked by everybody, you're probably not owning who you are in every situation. And it's not to say go find people and be disliked by them.
No.
But even the people that don't like you tend to have respect for you. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. So, man, we've come a long way.
Yeah, brother.
We have come a long, long way. And if you guys have been paying attention for the last few weeks, we started a series called Stepping Into the Man That You Want to Become. And this series is really to open the door for men to see who it is that they're really authentic with inside of themselves, and then find the ability and trace the steps so that they can actually present this man on a regular basis to the world. Now, there's so many reasons why this is important, and we're going to get into that today in this final episode of the series, which is all about the journey and what that even means, what that journey means for us as individuals, what that journey means for just fulfillment in life, you know, and not living by somebody else's terms, not living by somebody else's prescription. Now, many of you guys may not know, but if you have not done this work, there's a high likelihood your life is built on somebody else's beliefs and values. And that's something that Frank and I are going to break down today. But before we dive into the journey, we want to share with you guys that there is going to be a 4-week program that follows this series. We are going to give you guys the tools on how to implement everything we've talked about. We've gone from purpose to courage to emotions, and now we're going to talk about the journey, but we're going to give you guys all of the tools wrapped in a 4-week workshop calling Step Into the Man You Want to Become. Really broke the mold there on that. But we're going to give this to you guys, and we would love to have you guys join us for this 4-week program where we give you guys everything that's in our toolbox on how to put this together so you actually have not just a prescription, but a process that you can utilize every day after the workshop to ensure that you are on the right path to becoming that man of high-level values, of intention, and of his own beliefs, and standing in that truth in every scenario that you find yourself in. So make sure you guys go over to johnnylsasser.com. We'll have a link there for you guys to click. You'll be able to see everything that the program's going to include. You're going to get Frank and I partnering together, bringing our powers together to give you guys the most in-depth how-to of implementing this into your life. Now, after you go to johnnylsasser.com, make sure you stick around for this episode, because we're going to give you guys the people that stay through. Sorry for all you early departers. The people that stay through, you're going to get a pretty special offer that is on Frank and I, actually.
Yeah.
We're going to cover this for you guys, but we're going to give it, if you make it through and you join us for the course, you'll get an extra bonus at the end if you stick around. Now, let's dive into the journey. The journey is a powerful thing. This life is all about the journey. Like, people see mountaintops and they see valleys, and mountaintops and valleys are brief moments in times. Mm-hmm. But the journey is really what we make of it. And the journey is where you spend most of the time, is the climb or the descent. You're spending most of your time on the path. And all of that is to be said that you get to choose how you show up in those moments, in that journey. And most people don't realize that that is where we spend most of life. You know, we are always trying to think about keeping up with the Joneses, or trying to think about well, when I'm here, things will be better. Or when I get to this, things are going to be nice. Or when I get to this, I can have this. But to get to all those places, it's this long, arduous journey.
Yeah.
I mean, we just talked about my podcast hitting 400 episodes. That's a long, arduous journey. I would have never imagined 400 episodes, but it's a long, arduous journey, right? That was a mountaintop when I looked at episode 1. Right. And so the journey is where I've spent most of the time. And there's a brief moment of 400. And if you guys are listening to this, we're already well past it. So like, it's not there anymore.
Right.
So that's to tell you guys the mountaintops, the valleys are brief, and our journeys are the beautiful things that we actually call life. And there is, as men, there's a distinct role that we have on our journey that most people fail to accept. And most people don't realize they're not living in their own values and virtues along that journey. They're living in someone else's. So a lot of times, this is us emulating other people's lives. And Frank, you and I have seen this through coaching. You and I have seen this even probably potentially in our own lives before we started really defining our own values for ourselves. And I want to open the floor of what that really has looked like a lot in your coaching, because a lot of what you're doing is you're helping guys not do this anymore, live by somebody else's standards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We want them to, as you said, focus on their own journey by carving out a path for themselves. And I think when guys don't know how to do that because they don't know how to either identify what it is that they want, or they simply just don't know where to begin, or they're focused on the mountain or the valley or the chasm between where they are and where they think they want to get to, they don't know how to carve out that path. So what they'll do instead is they'll emulate. They'll emulate their bros. They'll emulate the guy at the gym or the guy that they work with. And what they might be, it's not that emulating is inherently bad. It's that it's not usually rooted in any truth, because what we're doing is we're essentially we're trying on what somebody is doing. We're watching somebody act or speak a certain way, and rather than looking a little bit deeper into what is the quality underneath that behavior that I vibe with or that I want for myself, we will often focus on the words that they're using, or some jargon, or some slang, or the tone of voice that they used, or the way they moved a certain way or walked a certain way. That we have a tendency to emulate the guys that we admire. And again, emulating is not inherently bad, but if it's not rooted in any truth, then what we're doing is what we're at risk of doing is coming across as a fraudulent copy, as mimicking somebody, and we can end up looking inauthentic.
Yeah.
But if we were to go a little bit deeper and look at what is it that I admire in this guy, or what he's doing rooted in? What's the quality that it's rooted in? Is it confidence? Is it authoritativeness? Is it leadership? What is leading inside him? And it takes a deeper look. But if we can identify what it is that's leading to the behavior that we find attractive and that we want for ourselves, then we could take the value or the virtue or the quality, and we can make that part of our personal journey and say, I want to learn to be a little bit more leader-like, or I'd like to learn to be a little bit more authoritative, or I want to learn to speak with conviction or have a little bit more confidence. And then rather than simply emulating what somebody else is doing, and which is mimicking, or it could come across as a parody, or again, inauthentic, we are taking the value underneath it, the quality underneath it, and saying, what would that look like if I apply that to myself? And then we're carving out a path for ourselves, excuse me. And and that helps us veer away from being inauthentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a level of discernment between emulating and inspired, right? And that's where I think a lot of guys, They want to emulate because they see the rewards that somebody has. So then they say, I have to do, I mean, it's literally the marketing schemes that are out there. The marketing schemes that are out there, and notice I didn't say scams, they're schemes, but they're not scams, they're legitimate marketing. But they'll say, hey, you want to learn how to earn $1 million a year? This is how I did it. And then what they're asking you to do is emulate what they did. But what in reality we should be doing as individuals is finding the philosophy behind that, maybe even the framework, but then wrapping that in our own flavor, wrapping that in our own ideas and beliefs and how we want to do it, while still using some of those principles. And in a long way, I'm saying exactly what you just said, which is find the values and virtues and then wrap those in your identity, wrap those in your personality, and allow those to be part of what you bring up, but allow them to be brought up in your own way, in your own authentic connections. Am I kind of hitting on
Absolutely, yeah. And we use two different examples. The example that you gave is one where there might be a little bit of like a methodology, like a play-by-play, that if they're emulating, they might know what steps to take, versus the example that I gave, we're not going to have a methodology, right? If we're looking at how a guy, one of our bros is walking or speaking or using certain slang, we might just feel compelled to want to mimic that and to copy it. And it's how slang becomes a thing, is that people, pick it up and start following trends. And again, I'm not saying, guys, that there's anything wrong with that. What I'm saying is that it is antithetical to carving out your own journey.
Yeah.
Is that ultimately it's very different than carving out your own journey. It's not that you can't do that. It's just recognize the difference, that if you're looking to carve out a path, that's a different process. But to your point, I think we're on the same page. With the example that you gave had something a little bit more methodical, that somebody could go through a play-by-play. But at the end of the day, even in that instance, as you pointed out, it's about making it your own, putting your own style on it, and knowing that it's in alignment with the person you want to be, rather than I'm just doing this because I want the same results as this other person because I want to be celebrated or get the same praise or honor that they're getting.
Right.
It's that I'm doing this because this is the man that I want to step into. There's a greater intention behind it. There's a truthfulness behind it.
Well, and we see a lot of men do this with kind of like, people they surround themselves with, and for most guys out there, and I'm just talking about the average guy, a lot of the circles they've surrounded themselves with, like gym bros and coworkers and stuff like that, a lot of them come from a place, maybe even when they were in a different space and time in their lives. And then they've surrounded themselves with those people, and then they mimic their behaviors. They mimic their level. They look at them and they're like, I want to do what they're doing, or I want to be treated the way they're treating, or I want to have the same rewards like we talked about that they have. So I'm going to do exactly what they do. And then, like you said, you become a carbon copy of somebody else, and not as a successful carbon copy of somebody else, right? You just kind of end up being a parrot at that point, and not looking as though you have any individual thought or belief system. But I see this so common that guys try to do this in their circle when you start to meet them, and then all of a sudden you see who they're hanging out with, and you're like, we really behave a lot like this guy over here. Very interesting. It's curious why you thought that was what you wanted to do, and then also why you thought that was the man you wanted to present. And so I think when we get into these circles, if we're not really looking towards the deeper provocation of why somebody does something or behaves the way they behave, we do run this risk of just being a parrot to them. And then we end up losing ourselves in any form of individual journey in life. And then we just end up being another version of somebody that's already out there.
Carbon copy.
What's the saying that don't try to be like anyone else? They're already taken, or something like that.
I've lost it too.
Yeah, it's such a good saying.
It is a good one, but essentially it's something to the effect of you can't be somebody else as well as they can. Yeah. Or stop trying to be someone that. Fucking hell.
Yeah,
I guess
something like that. But it's already taken, right? And there's a lot of truth to that. But so many men.
Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken.
Yeah, that's right. Something like that. Yeah, I think that was close. Yeah, that was actually close.
We're closer.
We're closer. That's closer. Someone correct us on the show notes and let us know what it is, or in the comments. But we find that a lot of times I also find that when guys are doing that, when they're trying to be like someone else in their lives, there's a lot of insecurity wrapped in that. And so the things that we've kind of gone over so far in the series, the purpose, the courage, the emotional state of things, the emotional regulation, when we go through all those things, if we've built those building blocks underneath this journey, we don't tend to feel very insecure, and therefore we're not as susceptible to be kind of drifted towards trying to be like somebody else. In my personal opinion, I don't know. Do you see that as well? Do you believe that as well?
That if we have clarity,
If we have those building blocks that we've talked about in the series, the start of this series, what we've kind of put everything together with, if we have those, we're less inclined to be like persuaded that we need to be like somebody else in our circle.
Yes, I think that the inclination, I know for me it'll still pop up because it can be very human for it to pop up, but I think that we recognize it. And yeah, you know what? Honestly, I would say probably the inclinations are less.
Mm-hmm.
The inclinations are less, and or we're more aware of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and or we're more aware of it when it happens. Yeah, or if we see it and we see something in one of our bros that we really like, it may actually be because we see that it's in alignment with the guy that we already are striving to become.
Sure.
So then it feels authentic and it feels genuine, and it's just like, yep, there's an alignment here. Yeah, it's not just like, it's not just flying by the seat of your pants and kind of aimlessly seeing things that you see are attractive or celebrated that other people are doing, and then just taking them on and trying them on as your own and seeing what sticks and what works and what doesn't. There's an intention to it. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's like, when we're talking about this is also about like men in your life that you've looked up to or that you do look up to. And what people, when we look at kind of the development, I've gotten so many conversations with this, and still highly educated people don't even know the real kind of the real data behind it. But when we're in ages 2 to 8, right, we're in what's called theta. And in theta brainwave, this is where hypnosis works. Okay. So we're very malleable in that theta state. And a lot of what's written for us as men, well, a lot of what we carry around from the subconscious happens in that 2 to 8 years old. Now, there's also a lot of development after that, a lot of influential development from choices of who we are like, oh, this person has a certain level of value for us. But when we're younger, we don't really have that system to create value. So what happens is we're super malleable and we're super pliable, and we're basically a sponge that's absorbing everything we see. Bandura's social learning theory talks about how when we're children, especially before we can speak, we're taking a look at actions and behaviors and associating them with masculine and feminine, right? So those things tend to happen in these early years. And this is how we can become a carbon copy of somebody else. And we can even be a carbon copy unintentionally. And that is also something that we become victim to if we're unaware of how to assess and recalibrate ourselves. So I say all this because the fact that in those 2 to 8 years old, you're getting this story written for you already, where your journey is about ready to be built on somebody else's insecurities, somebody else's beliefs, somebody else's ideas, somebody else's strengths, somebody else's alignment, somebody else's misalignment. Like, you're building an entire life, an entire framework built on this that you didn't choose. You actually didn't choose. And so as we develop as men, we have to acknowledge that carbon copy is part of what's been handed to us, and it serves us to a certain extent. It serves us to a certain place in our life where we then gain the ability to have critical thinking, to have assessment, to have evaluation, and then to consider what it is that links up with us.
Right. Who do I want to be?
Right.
You know, yeah, I think the father role is probably a great example here, right? Is that, you know, the father is somebody who we might want to emulate or live as a carbon copy of them. But again, only until we can determine our own values and our own journey and our own path. And I think that's a tricky thing. I have guys in their probably 40s and even 50s, who I'm still teaching them a little bit or guiding them and coaching them through how to detach a bit from their parents, in the sense of they need to establish an identity outside of who their father is. You know, that can be a part of who they are, but at this point in their life that they have their own individuality. They have their own set of values. And some of that might be influenced by who their father was, but that's not all they are.
Right.
You know, that's not all of you. It's part of you, but it's not all of you. And in some instances, maybe you don't want it to be any of you. But in many instances, yeah, we take on their values as our own, but then we're, as you pointed out, we're taking on their bullshit too. We're taking on their traumas. We're taking on their story. And at some point, we have to carve out a path for ourselves. It's our responsibility, really, as men, as we get older.
But we're not taught that.
No, we're not.
We're not taught that, and there's not a lot of people talking about it.
Right.
Because a lot of people are talking about frameworks of an ignorant statement, which they like to refer to as traditional masculinity, because it's not a real thing, because traditional to who? Traditional to what culture? So masculinity in and of itself cannot be traditional. So it's a misinterpretation of traditional masculinity that people are proponents of. And so people are being passed like, hey, here's the traditional masculine things, right? That's what's being said to them. They're not being told, hey, assess the masculine features that were handed to you from previous generations and see what fits for you, see what you like, what's authentic, and then build and curate the other things that might be missing that you actually feel connected to.
Yep.
And then that becomes your value system. Don't sit there and just get handed a product and think that it's going to serve you when it's not evolving whatsoever when you're handed that product and you don't question it. And guys just aren't taught this. You know, we aren't taught. I wasn't taught this, although a lot of what was given to me. So my personal influence was my uncle, right? It is my uncle.
Yeah.
He is the one that like I looked at as like the epitome of kind of like what a good man was, what a healthy masculine was. He came with his own shit too. And he's been very vocal through my life about what he's fucked up and what he doesn't like, even about like the way he presents himself sometimes. And he allowed me to see insight to some of the things I don't want to carry. But up until we had those conversations, up until I was able to really understand those conversations, I was just emulating everything he did, right? For good and for bad.
Right.
And so, yeah, we have to detach from that. And we have to, back to kind of like the last episode, we have to become more logical and not emotional, and not say, but that's my dad. Say, that's a man that gave me some good values, but now I got to assess everything. I've got to assess what I want to take with me and what I want to throw out, you know?
It's through this deep self-exploration that we tap into our subconscious, because you're right, we're not taught that. And because it's so deep in our subconscious, for most of us, we don't even think to look at it.
No.
We don't think to question it or to probe at it. It's through this deep self-work that you and I are encouraging other men to do, but that we've also, as exemplars, needed to do for ourselves, that we live through this and we discovered these things, and they will too, or you guys will too. It can be a scary, actually, thing to feel like you have to detach from this thing that you thought was, how do I want to say this? Where's the fear in it? I think that the discomfort is probably in, that's what it is. It's a betrayal. It could feel like a betrayal.
Sure.
Yeah. Is that it could feel like a betrayal. There could be guilt in it. And if you don't have if you don't feel as though you have the permission of that person who may still be in your life or a part of your life, now you have double the work to do, because you have to set a boundary and you have to be willing to set yourself free. And they might not be on board with that journey, but that's okay. You got to do it anyway. And it's a pivotal point in any man's life when they do that. And a lot of men, as you've noted, never do. But it's a game changer.
Yeah.
It's a game changer. And it's identifying. What did you say a moment ago that really resonated? traditional masculine virtues, or the other thing that I like to call it is, and I know you don't like that terminology, but for the sake of people understanding what we're referring to, I'll also say some of the masculine ideals that we grew up with. It's being intentional about it and being able to. It's no longer subconscious now. It's like you're consciously looking at these things and recognizing what's important to you, and then you're looking at, this came from this person, this came from that person, this is what I grew up with. And some of them may seem inherently bad, but we want to find the positive qualities underneath these ideals and then apply them to ourselves in a way that aligns with our individuality. That's the journey. And there you may notice some separation between you and the person who you were, maybe you and your uncle in some cases. Sure. Yeah.
And that's where the journey starts, though. We have to understand this. We got to have that separation to truly be on our own journey.
Yeah.
Or else, again, we're walking a journey that was written for us, not written by us. Right. And
recognizing what the journey is not.
Right.
Yeah.
Recognizing what it's not. And that means if you're just embodying somebody else's complete identity, then you're not living your journey.
You're not living your journey. Yeah.
That's not your journey
living
whatsoever.
Somebody else's, and you can't do that. Yeah.
And I think also, as you were talking, I was thinking about other things that men might run up to, which would cause resistance to this, and that's respect. If you have a high level of respect for your father, if you guys had a good relationship and he was the masculine figure for you, or you have I have a high respect for my uncle, and it almost feels as like if you're having to come to this conversation of like, okay, are there things I don't like about what he did or the way he lived his life? Well, am I disrespecting him now?
Right.
Am I tarnishing his legacy in my eyes, or am I tarnishing his legacy to my kids, his grandkids, or whatever it is? So there is a level too that you got to really come to terms with and kind of wrap your head around of like, what is the friction that's going to be there around respect, and how do you have that different conversation of, no, it is respectful for me to look at him in his good and his flaws, right? And say, okay, what is it that I want to absorb and what is it I don't? To make that very intentional. And it's not disrespectful. It's actually just being autonomous.
It's letting, and telling yourself it's not a betrayal.
Right, and it's not a betrayal.
It's not a betrayal. It's not a disrespect. It's not a betrayal. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're working on our identification of this carbon copy, what are some key things that we can look for in ourselves that are going to trigger us that we're not on that journey? What are some key things you think of when you've coached men that you've identified where, hey, if someone saw that, they'd be like, well, that's what Frank and Johnny said. Maybe I'm on the wrong path.
I think the first time that we start to recognize it in ourselves is we sense a misalignment. We sense that something is off as we don't feel good when we're doing it because it hasn't been able to attach itself to some truth. Again, unless you're a really good actor, and most people out there, unless they're actually actors, are probably not.
Or narcissists.
That's another
conversation, yeah. Or full-blown narcissists.
Right, yeah. And narcissists can be very good actors. But unless you are a very good actor, it is very likely that you are feeling, here's a good one that people can identify with, imposter syndrome. Yeah. If you start feeling some imposter syndrome, and to be fair, this is not a surefire way of recognizing when you're out of alignment, because anytime we do something new, we could feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. Yeah. But if you are emulating, or if you're being a carbon copy, or if you're living in alignment with somebody else's journey other than your own, I think even if it does lie deep in your subconscious, the driving force or why you chose this journey or this path, and it feels second nature to you, that you will stumble upon moments where you feel some kind of misalignment, or you feel like it's not attached. It's not attached to some inner truth, that you might feel like you're not being fully authentic, and the imposter syndrome stays and it sticks around for a long period of time. If you feel that frequently, I'd say that that's a sign that you may be living somebody else's journey, and that you might not have your own carved out in front of you. That's a sign of these things that we're talking about. What do you think?
I agree with that. I agree. If you start to see that misalignment to certain things, but you don't know why, you just don't feel connected to it, or you don't feel connected to the behavior or to the presentation of the man that you want to embody, I think when you start to have a little bit of awareness around that, you know something's off. I think that's the moment that you got to start having the questions. And I think from there, that's the next step is like, you got to be like, okay, now this is time for me to start questioning this. Like, why am I feeling that? And what was it about that moment that really set me off as me feeling kind of a little uneasy? That awareness piece cannot be understated. You know, when we become awareness is the first step to all this. From the first episode about purpose to the last episode about your journey in this entire series, awareness is the first step to all of this. You got to find a reference point. You've got to have the ability to say, I recognize something. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, I recognize something.
Right.
And then from there, you got to start, that's how you start peeling back the onion. But that awareness of misalignment is what really cues you in to say, okay, now the conversation needs to get a little more developed. Now I need to really look at what's causing that misalignment and then potentially where it came from. And then that'll take you down the rabbit hole of like, oh yeah, that was how my father acted. I remember this time we were in a automotive store and he was getting some parts and like he did this and like there was something that it was the first time I saw somebody behave that way or the man that I looked up to behave that way, and that's not the way I want to behave. So I feel really kind of misaligned with that action, but I still present it.
Yep.
Right. I still present that style of masculinity in his way. So that would be, yeah, I agree. That awareness has to happen.
It does have to happen, and it takes balls. It takes balls to be able to peer that deep. It takes intention. It takes investigating. You got to play a detective.
Yeah.
And
You
figuring
do have to
yourself
play a
out.
detective.
You do. You got to play a detective and figuring yourself out. Yeah.
And you gotta take ownership of it too. You know, I think a lot of
It's
guys,
our responsibility.
Yeah. And I think a lot of guys in correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I see is a lot of guys will get embarrassed. So they won't want to take ownership of it because I think when they get embarrassed, then they want to play the victim because embarrassment's never a good feeling to have.
But to be clear, embarrassed from what? From the flaws that they discover?
Embarrassed from the man that they're presenting. If they start to have awareness and start to go into that investigative mode, then they get embarrassed that they've been behaving a certain way or embarrassed in the way that they interact with people. And they're like, geez, like, fuck, I really do that on a regular basis? Like, it's just, you can find yourself being embarrassed by mimicking the behavior of other people once you start to crack that frickin' bottle of, oh shit, I'm evaluating everything now.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's like, oh, that's not a good look.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that's the male ego. It can be very delicate, and we can be very prideful where we don't want to look that way or
causes us to run. Causes us to then run away and then to say, no, Frank, I'm not going to deal with that. I don't have any problems. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, like, guys, we've done it. We've been there. You gotta be willing to be embarrassed to go on this journey. You know, you got to be willing to fall flat on your face. You got to be willing to discover things that are going to make you feel uncomfortable. That's the first step in many ways in leaning into courage, is because it's a courageous leap to do this type of deep self-exploration. I promise you, you're going to land on things that you feel uncomfortable about. But yeah, you've done it. We've done it. I've done it, and it's par for the course. And you build up a resiliency to embarrassment over time. It doesn't last as long, or eventually maybe it doesn't come up as much. And you'd become less embarrassed over these things because you're just like, you know what? Yeah, I'm human. That's part of life. You know, I'm flawed. But yeah, definitely for a lot of guys who maybe start this journey or don't even begin, it's because they fear. Well, we could take the embarrassment emotion a little bit farther, which would lean into shame. Yeah. And then shame is nobody likes to feel shame.
No.
Yeah. People dodge shame like the plague. Yeah.
And rightfully so. I mean, shame is just it's a terrible feeling because it's a self-judgment feeling. You're feeling like you're inferior no one's calling you inferior. You're making that up for yourself, and that's where the shame comes in. But I think guys, and one of the things I've done in my life, especially because the fact that I've been in a lot of positions regularly where my life was on the line, right? So like tomorrow was never promised. And I've taken a philosophy of the cosmic perspective. And I think this can really help men to look at themselves and kind of maybe navigate that embarrassment or shame, is to take the cosmic perspective of, hey, man, if I actually live my journey in full authenticity, the cosmic perspective is I live a life I'm happy with. I live a life of fulfillment. And that brief moment of embarrassment is nothing, because I owned everything to get me to my deathbed saying, I'm good, man. Like there's no regrets I have. Right. And then that cosmic perspective lends a lot more substantiation to just living in a fully embodied way, where you're not worried about those tiny nuances that happen on the daily basis. You're more worried about, what's the big picture look like? You know, is the big picture me giving my kids the ability to see a healthy masculine version that is going to serve them in the evolution of society, and also to be able to regulate and balance themselves so they don't deal with a lot of the struggles I had to go through or previous society had to go through? Or is the cosmic perspective that, it's better for them to see a man who is stoic and it doesn't have any problems that he shows to anybody, but he holds it all in and has a lot of regret on his deathbed, which we've seen from the previous generation of men.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's some there's some emotional regulation in that journey.
Sure.
It's separating yourself from the desires of the ego and realigning yourself with your values and what's actually important to you in life. And when we do that, the hits to the ego matter less. Yeah, because we're more focused on, I want to be able to go to sleep at night feeling like a good person who had integrity today and who lived in alignment with the man that I want to be. Yeah. And I showed up as the man that I want to be. And if I had these little flubs along the way and these little things that popped up that were a bruise to the ego, that's all that is. It's simply a fleeting, ephemeral hit to the ego, and it doesn't matter in the big picture. No. When I'm on my deathbed, that's not what I'm going to be thinking about. I'm not going to be thinking about the fact that I didn't retaliate because somebody, said something that bruised my ego. I'm going to be thinking about, I was the one who stayed in alignment with the guy that I want to be in that situation. I showed up as the man that I want to be, and I'm proud of him. I'm going to go to sleep at night knowing that, and in a couple days, or maybe even in a couple hours, I'm going to forget that exchange even happened and that my ego was bruised.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good, because I'm going to forget that it happened. When we look at the big picture, we're more susceptible to allowing ourselves to just not harbor the emotional state of whatever transgression took place, or whatever embarrassing evaluation we had. It allows us to release that, and I love that forgetting. It's not forgetting in a bad way, I'm just going to, there's so much in that concept as well, because if I don't have retribution or vengeance, then I'm just telling people they can walk all over me, right? Like, that's things I've had to deal with.
That's pride.
I know, I've
Men
dealt with it.
love to call it principle, and I'm like, brother, that's pride.
Pride.
Let's not confuse the two.
And pride is a killer. I think I spent a whole chapter on it in my book about pride and why pride can be very detrimental to who we want to be in life.
Yeah.
Because when we stand on it, we can stand in a falseness that doesn't allow us to expand and evaluate the things that we really need to evaluate.
Yeah. Do we have a minute for a quick story?
Oh yeah, go into it.
So, because you brought up your book, and I was just like, I talk about this. I have a section in my book on this too. So I wonder if he's listening. Maybe one day he'll hear this. Me and a buddy, I was visiting actually in DC. We were in our 20s, and we were just a weekend of debauchery, of just hanging out and doing what guys in their early 20s do. And this was midday. We're at the grocery store, picking up a couple things, just ultimately in good spirits. Nobody was in a bad mood, maybe a little hungover, but ultimately in good spirits and excited about, what was going to ensue later that evening, another night of debauchery. And he's checking his stuff out at the grocery store. And all of a sudden, you know, she swipes a bag of chips. The lady swipes a bag of chips and puts them in the grocery bag. And he says, whoa, hold on a second. Those were marked as $1. And she looks and they came up as like $2.49 or something like that. And she's like, she pauses and she says, you know, they're $1 when you buy 3 or more. And he said, the sign said that they were $1. And she said, the sign says that they're $1 if you buy 3 or more. And I'm watching this exchange take place, and I'm trying to like keep my mouth shut. And he says, take them out of the bag. I don't want them. And I'm like, so, you know, and I'm like, wait, hold on. And, you know, there's people behind us, right? Yeah. So, and I'm just like, all right, you know, let's get this, let's get a move on here. But me being maybe a little overly sensible, I look at my friend and I'm like, I'll buy the chips. Yeah. And he's like, no, I don't want them. And I'm like, but you do want them.
Yeah. You threw them in there.
And he looks at me and he says, it's the principle. So what was the principle? Yeah. Was the principle, don't let misleading, you know, don't ever succumb to misleading advertisements. Yeah. Even at the cost of spiting yourself and not getting a bag of chips that you want. Well, like, what was the actual principle? Yeah. So me being the prideful motherfucker that I went back that next fucking day and I got those fucking chips and I brought them to him and I said, hey, I got you the chips. He didn't eat them.
Oh, gosh.
He didn't eat them.
He went extra.
Yeah. I wanted to see how far he was going to go. Yeah. And then, you know, I didn't eat them either on principle, of course. Yeah.
So neither person ate them on principle.
Yeah. Men love saying it's the principle.
Bro, we find some really weird hills to die on.
Yeah. Seriously. Like, can you tell me what the principle was, please? Yeah. I'd love to know what this morally, you know, this universal moral principle was that
against
you were
this bag of chips.
Right. Yeah. No, that was an act of pride.
Yeah. And that pride cost you guys the enjoyment of some delicious chips.
That's right. Yeah. And but anyway, circling back to what you were saying, yeah, man, emotions are ephemeral. You know, if he would have got the chips, he would have enjoyed his chips, and he would have forgot about the fact that they were marked at this price or that price or whatever. You know, but the ego is, you know, and I know we didn't make this about the ego, but it seems logical that it would come up. Yeah.
Well, the ego
on this journey.
The ego and pride just are kind of detractors from living your purposeful journey.
Yep.
Of living your authentic journey.
We're not careful.
Yeah, because they'll sidetrack us. You know, they'll sidetrack us to fighting battles that weren't meant to be fought. They'll sidetrack us to planting our flag on hills that, you know, essentially were not meant to be planted on, because there's nothing but failure at the end of it, or it's a detractor because it forces you to put time and effort into something and energy into something, which it can last for years depending on what it is. That detracts you from living the purposeful journey you really want to live, the man you want to be, right? Yeah. And so like all of that to say that pride can be something that steers you off that path of your journey, along with not being able to really assess your values and virtues based upon your authenticity. Pride can also be an extra byproduct that detracts you off that path as well.
100%.
But as you're doing that, you know, you mentioned something of, and I caught this in your story, is that you were thinking about the people behind you, right? Like in this line, and you're thinking about like, all right, motherfucker, we got to get moving. So just like buy the fucking chips, you know, like get the fucking chips, like get off your fucking high horse.
Yep.
And I think for all my people pleasing people that are listening right now, they're like, yeah, Frank, that's a good job. Get the fuck out of the way. Like these people don't want to wait either, right? And I think a lot of men find themselves, they hate to admit this, but they find themselves building a personality, building a persona off of people pleasing, off of that same mentality of like, who's going to like me? Who's going to accept me?
Yep.
How cool can I be if I do this version of masculinity like Frank, as opposed to this version of masculinity like Johnny, right? Without saying, well, what's my authenticity in masculinity? What's my authenticity in my personality? And so they have this there's like a gravitational pull, and I understand it to a certain extent. Ancestrally, we want to be part of community. Ancestrally, excommunication is part of the most harshest punishments we can receive. People would argue, well, death, Johnny. Well, that's not actually the case. It's excommunication. Being excommunicated from a community is really harsh for us because we've just evolved this way. So men want to be part of community. So in that, they build their version of masculinity based on what's accepted in the community, right?
Yeah.
And would you say that also creates them to be a chameleon with their surrounding group of men as well?
I see chameleon as a good thing.
It can be.
It can
I
be
think
a
it
good
can
thing.
be.
Yeah,
But not if it misaligns you from
Right.
who you are.
Exactly.
Right.
As soon as your authenticity is being compromised, then it's not
Right.
a good thing. But we, yeah, I mean, in certain societies and certain groups and group dynamics, we might adapt. We might adapt certain isms that are a part of the culture of said group in order to be a part of that group. And as long as it still aligns with our authenticity, yeah, maybe we're being a chameleon in that instance, as long as there's still some alignment. But I think in the way that you're saying it, I feel you. It's that if you're people pleasing, right? Is that if we're people pleasing and we're betraying who we are or
Right.
masking a part of ourselves in order to be liked, then yeah, we are absolutely setting ourselves up for actually we're setting ourselves up for a lot of bad, negative outcomes. One is we're probably not going to end up being liked, ironically, in the long run, is that usually that's what that leads to, is people eventually will see that your words and your actions are not in alignment and that you are not consistent and you can't uphold this image of being this person you want to be seen as long enough to convince the people close to you that you're that person. So, but it's a detractor from being the person that you want to be. Because you're not. You're being what you think other people need or want you to be in order for them to like you. Yeah, and that's it could lead to probably the two other examples that we gave. Right? It's all kind of interconnected.
Oh,
It's
of course.
that living in alignment with the values of your uncle, even perhaps at the cost, when you didn't realize it, at the cost of betraying your own, or worse yet, not even identifying your own. Or somebody else living in alignment with the values of a parent and not recognizing their own. It could be driven by this need to be liked by them. It could be.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, or the emulating example that we talked about earlier. When we're emulating a bro, what is the reason that we're doing it? Well, because we find the behavior that we want to emulate attractive. Okay, but why? Oh, because he's getting accolades and he's getting praise and he's being liked by these other people for doing it. Or we want to be liked by the bro, you know, who we're emulating. So we're going to do what he does too. But yeah, I think that that it's also a detractor from finding your own path ultimately.
Yeah, when you're trying to people please and be cool and fit in with the crowd, you know, you have different crowds of friends, but at the end of the day, like, you still have certain values that you want to uphold regardless of the situation and conversation you're in. I find today one of the easiest ways for us to associate this conversation for everybody to understand is political, right? You have these two polarizing political sides of the fence, and you know, high likelihood is you have friends on the opposite side from you, or the not as consistent thought processes as you do. And so what happens is, in an effort to avoid confrontation, you will not, you as in the general you will not say anything that's, you know, contradictory to what they're saying if they have, let's say, maybe a little bit of a more overpowering personality. So therefore, you violate your own virtues of being honest or having integrity because you didn't speak up to something that you thought was actually a little important in that moment. And in politics, we find this a lot in groups nowadays with people, because this is why we get groupthink, right? This is exactly why we have groupthink, because people don't have an alternative view being presented to them to make them think differently. But in all of that, as we relate it to masculinity, our journey, and our own virtues and values, when we violate that, then we go home not feeling very good about ourselves. And then we've all of a sudden started to chip away at the man that we desire to be on this journey, we've started to deteriorate his value. And now all of a sudden, guys lack confidence, right? And it's a snowball effect of things that start to happen when you start to not own that guy that you've created inside, and we start to see, wow, now all of a sudden I am kind of a doormat to people. I am kind of just this people pleaser because I'm scared of confrontation, or I don't feel strong enough to stand in my presence or position of values. And then we just start to tear down that guy. So now we don't even have him anymore, and that's where I find I've found, even at points in my own life, I found that I haven't probably held to the integrity of who I was. And I leave that situation feeling a little disjointed because I'm like, man, in other scenarios, I would have said something, but I didn't do it there. Why? Did I place some value above me on somebody else? Like Frank's a multimillionaire, business owner, and I had to give him some level of respect that he didn't earn. But because he's ran businesses, I had to shut my fucking mouth and not own the man who I am. Like, that also deteriorates your value though to them, right? So the thing that you think,
the
thing you think's helping you isn't.
A lot of times people will see right through that.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think that most of the time we feel when we have deviated from authenticity. I think that we feel it. We might not be able to put our finger on it, but we feel off inside when we've deviated from being authentic. And sometimes just it's outweighed by the desire to be liked.
Yeah.
In the moment, is that if the desire to be liked is too strong, then we might justify or be willing to deal with the feelings that come after that of, I know that I've deviated from my authenticity, but it's okay because I'm liked by this person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big paradigm shift. That one is being it's a big part of the journey. I'll say it now. It's being willing to be disliked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's courage in it. It requires courage, but you need to have the courage to be disliked in order to in order to be able to stay and not deviate from your path and from your authenticity. Is that whether it's a discussion about politics or you're discussing a discussion about a movie, is that you
Right.
if it doesn't align with your belief or your opinion, you can either shut the fuck up or you can assert yourself to say, oh, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
But you don't have to agree with the person when you don't actually agree with the person.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where this all comes back to what we've built, how we're building this entire series, was that when you're on that journey, you have to be willing to be disliked. And to be able to be willing to be disliked, you have to have a purpose that keeps you aligned with your journey. You got to have the courage to be disliked, and you got to have the emotional regulation to understand that I'm not affected when I am disliked, and all of that, just like being a good leader in life, you're not always liked, but when you own your leadership style, when you own the man that you are and you're authentic with him and you feel good about everywhere you bring him in the world, you might not be liked, but I can guarantee you're probably respected.
I knew you.
That is what,
yes,
that is what is most important, because even high quality good leaders, they're not always liked. Majority of them, if they are liked by everybody, they probably are doing something wrong and they're not high quality leaders.
Or they're just not fucking doing anything valuable.
Right.
They're not saying shit of
Right.
value.
And you're not, but then you're not a high quality leader,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing as men. As men, if we are liked by everybody, you're probably not owning who you are in every situation. And it's not to say go find people and be disliked by them.
No.
But even the people that don't like you tend to have respect for you, right? And if they don't like you, they're like, yeah, but I don't necessarily, don't like him. I'm not gonna go have a beer with him, but I respect the hell out of him.
They'd pick you to be on their team.
Right. I had a sergeant in Ranger Battalion that man, dude, we would get there. We first got to Ranger Battalion, and let me tell you guys, if you think the pipeline to special operations is supposed to be hard because they want you to fail, exacerbate that by about tenfold. And that's how hard it is to stay in special operations, because they don't want you to be there either until you prove yourself, right? So we had this sergeant when I first got in. It was the first year, my whole first year of being in Spec Ops was like just getting the ever living shit kicked out of you. You got no sleep. You got almost zero free time to yourself. And we had this one sergeant that was just a fucking asshole, bro. Like he would be up there in the evenings. We'd get released from duty, right? So then it'd be like your free time. You'd go work out, you'd go to chow, you'd just like watch TV to like down, to kind of disassociate from everything. Not with this motherfucker. He would be up in the squad room with us, fucking doing, have his dip in his mouth, making you do push-ups and fucking just kicking the shit out of you, even after everybody else in your platoon was released, right? Then he'd come up in the morning on like a Saturday. Nobody else is there. Nobody else in the fucking platoon's doing work. He's up, waking you the fuck up at like 6 a.m. and you guys are going out and working shoot house. You're going out and getting the shit kicked out of you, doing push-ups, having to do runs, having to do pull-ups, all the things. He's going and taking you out to this simulated town that we created where we would run, high-level missions on, and he'd make you clear houses. And you're just fucking doing this day in and day out. You don't get a break. Bro, he was a dick. I would never have a beer with this guy. I was like, and he was an asshole. He would say something that was kind of funny, and you'd laugh. You'd be like, oh, my fucking clown, do push-ups. And you're like, bro, what the fuck? Like, I thought we were bonding here.
Wow.
But that's the kind of guy he was. But, in his own way, he was preparing us for war. Yeah. He was preparing us for the fact that, we had to watch his back too. And he wanted to make sure we were at the most capable level of doing that so he could come home as well, right? So I understood later in life what he was doing. But at the time, I didn't want to have a beer with him.
Hell no.
Fuck that, dude.
Fuck that motherfucker.
But he earned a ton of respect from us.
Of course.
We all respected the shit out of him because guess what? When you went into a room with him, he was shit hot. He was so good at being a special operations operator. Like, he was so good at it that you had to respect him. You didn't have to like him, but you had to respect him. And that is who we need to be as men in life and who we need to be when we lead in life as men. We don't need to always be liked, but we can earn that respect by owning our values and by pursuing our journey. And, this is where, everybody can relate to the hero's journey. The hero's journey, they're not always liked, and they also go through immense failures. Yeah. Right? Luke Skywalker, he's the epitome of this, right? It's one of the movies we can all talk about is Star Wars and how Luke was, having to be raised by essentially Obi-Wan Kenobi being taught like the things in life or the things of the Jedi way. Then Obi-Wan gets killed. Then Luke gets his ass kicked and then gets picked up by Yoda, right? And then all of a sudden Yoda becomes his teacher in that moment. But there's these ups and downs of our hero's journey where we're not going to be at our best, but if we hold true to who we are, we'll make it through all of it to be at the end of it being the preeminent Jedi fighting Darth Vader and kicking his ass.
Right.
Like,
got to be willing to fail though.
Yeah, you got to be willing to fail, but you got to be willing to go on this journey and own your authenticity and own your individuality in that. And when you can do that, the whole notion of being accepted by all kind of goes away, and you get the opportunity to just live in sovereignty. You get the opportunity to really see yourself as the man you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good feeling, and it's one that it's really hard to describe. Yeah, but when you feel that alignment inside, it feels right. Doesn't always feel good.
Yeah,
but it feels right.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, it feels right. So what you're saying is that the hero's journey, for those who don't know, is everyone that we've ever watched, all of our favorite films where there's a hero involved, there's a massive failure, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a massive failure in there. There's a massive valley that they have to enter into. And if perseverance isn't part of who they are, if their alignment is off, then they couldn't have persevered to become the hero of their own story. Someone else would have become it. I mean, Batman, it's, Bruce Wayne, his fear of the caves and the bat, and then he uses that fear to amplify the persona of Batman and go off and fight dark figures who are in the shadows. Like, all of this happens, and then obviously repeatedly through villains. He's got all kinds,
Right,
he's
yeah.
got all of his downfalls, but it's just constant. It's a constant thing. The hero's journey is that you got to be putting yourself out there you've got to persevere to even be considered the hero. And no one's the hero that's given the silver spoon and just lives with the silver spoon their whole life and has never faced adversity.
Right.
Like,
we always see the hero go through adversity. We always see him or her fail in one way or another, and we always see them do some deep self-reflection at some point or another, some deep self-exploration and questioning of themselves.
There's a moment of the phoenix rising for all of the heroes. Every hero journey has a phoenix rising.
Yeah.
What they knew about themselves was burned down, and they had to come back anew to be able to conquer.
Yep.
And that is really kind of the epitome of that hero's journey. And I think that when we talk about our journey and whether it's my masculine blueprint or your values and virtues, when we talk about any of this, there's a moment of burning down what we know. There's a moment of lighting the match, using the gasoline and saying, bro, we got to kind of torch this right now. And then we got to rebuild. And that's a special moment. That is where we get to really see who we are, coming out of taking everything down and then recalibrating intentionally to who we want to be.
Boom. Yeah. And it's a powerful, it's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta, if you don't embark on that, and I know we're beating a dead horse, you're just going to live somebody else's life, and it's not going to ever be yours. And you're just never going to have that fulfillment that comes, the reward that comes with risk that we've talked about, the reward that comes with courage to face fear, the reward to be that comes with being disliked but being respected, you know, the reward of doing what is right, the hard right over the easy wrong, because the hard right means I'm in alignment with who I am, right? Like, all of those things have massive rewards, and you don't get to experience that if you're not willing to jump on this journey and to say that I'm going to, at some points, not be enjoying this, at some points be in the valleys, at some points I'm gonna have to burn it down.
Well, that's the part that I think that is really powerful of what you're saying, that I'm gonna use also, as the burn it all down, framing it that way. Because I remember one time, it's happened several times, but one guy said to me, I feel like I need to kill my old identity in some ways. And I said, yeah, there may be some grieving through this process.
100%.
Yeah, is that we do. We have to burn it all down in order to reconstruct it. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where we bring you guys, is to the burning down, to have that awareness that to be on your own journey, you've got to be willing to burn it all down. I know I have in multiple levels, professionally and personally, and emotionally, and you know, all of those things have happened in my life. They've happened with Frank. Absolutely. You've got to be willing to do that. And what Frank and I have put together in this series was to give you guys the aspects of why this is important, what these things are and they're not, and what they are not, what purpose is and what it's not, what courage is and what it's not, what emotional regulation is and what it's not. You know, we've given this to you guys to show you what it's like to see this in your own life and why it's important. But now we're going to give you guys the how. All right. And as I mentioned when we started this episode, you guys are going to get a bonus if you stuck through. And I give you guys a lot of appreciation for sticking through, for those that are hearing this right now. But we're going to give you the how in a 4-week program where we take all of what we've gone through in this series, and Frank and I are going to actually give you the tools that start to cultivate that purpose, that courage, that emotional regulation, and ultimately get you focused on your journey. So Stepping into the man that you want to become, the 4-week workshop we have prepared for you guys at johnnylsasser.com. Make sure you guys head over, check the show notes. We're going to put it down there. You'll be able to gain access to this, see exactly what we're doing. We got a whole landing page for you guys, so there's no kind of murkiness about what's going to happen in this. We're going to be very clear, and we're going to be very intentional as coaches in this to get the most out of you guys. So don't sit there and think there's not going to be work involved. If you've listened to this whole series, you know Frank is a stickler for making the work happen. Likewise, I have a high level of integrity of making you guys work. We're going to put you guys in the work. But this is 4 weeks of work that is going to last a lifetime. Like, this will change your life. And I mean that not to say that we're that good, but I will say that we're that good.
We are that good.
We're going to put you guys in a position to change the trajectory. Your 1 degree off starts with this 4-week program. We're not asking for a ton of your time, but we will put you guys into work for 4 weeks that is going to change the trajectory of where you're going to go. And if you've stuck through now, the offer that we're going to give you guys, and this is on Frank and I, is you are going to get the first 10 guys that sign up for this course are going to get Frank's book and my book hand signed, shipped to you guys on us. Okay. That is what we're promising on top of if you guys sign up for this course. So that is where we're going to leave you. That bonus is available. If you stuck through and you heard this, you sign up, we're going to acknowledge that. We'll document it and we'll send you guys out the book. So don't miss out. Be the first 10 guys to be part of this, and be ready to get involved in you. Be ready to be introspective. Be ready to be challenged. Be ready to do work that's going to expand you beyond where you've ever been before, and allow yourself to really embark on a journey that is yours. So, Frank, thank you, bro, for this series, for this time. Thank you for joining us, for giving this to the Art of Masculinity community. I'm excited for this course. I'm excited for working with you as a counterpart. And is there any last words you want to give everybody before we sign off from this series?
I just want to say that, I mean, you said it all. So I just want to say that I'm super excited, and I'm so honored that you wanted to do this with me. And I don't know if these guys know, but I'm going to tell them quickly. You've probably mentioned it at one point or another. This all came about just because Johnny and I connected a few months ago on a podcast episode and we were just riffing on masculinity. And at the end of it, we were both just like, yo, we need to do more. Like, there's so much alignment. And I know that that's a word that we've brought up so many times over the last 4 episodes of this series is the term alignment. And this is what happens when you have clarity on who you are in the journey and the trajectory that you're on, is that when you meet somebody else who is on a similar journey, and you feel that alignment and that synchronicity, and we felt that virtually. You know, did we tell them where we are?
Yeah, we mentioned, New York.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I mean, Johnny's based in South Carolina, and I'm up here near the city, and this is the first time we're connecting in person, but we felt that synchronicity, right off the bat, and it was like, yo, we gotta do something together. So anyway, man, I just want to say to you, you already said everything to them. I want to say to you that I'm so honored and I'm so excited that you want to do this with me and that you want to go on this journey together. So yeah, brother.
Appreciate
I think this is an alignment with the men that we want to step into, is by helping them step into the men that they want to become. So there's a lot of alignment here. I know we're getting cheesy now, but there's a lot of alignment here, and it's our way of stepping into purpose as well. Even deeper into purpose. Yeah,
absolutely, brother. Well, thank you, brother, for the kind words. Thank you for showing up on the show how you have over the past 4 weeks. And to everybody listening, make sure you guys head over to johnnylsasser.com, check out the course, and be part of it if you feel called to. If you feel that you want to take this challenge on, I guarantee you will not be led astray, and you will not regret it. So join us for the 4-week workshop on stepping into the man that you want to become. Thanks, guys.